So the Trump administration just told us that the Epstein files, the ones they've been promising to release for months, don't actually exist. There is no client list, no blackmail material, nothing to see here, folks. And apparently, Attorney General Pam Bondi told Trump back in May that his name appeared in those very files. She told Fox News in February that Epstein's client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now to review. But now, the Justice Department says there is no incriminating client list and no credible evidence that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals. So either Bondi was lying then, or she's lying now. Either way, we're being lied to by the people who claim to represent transparency and draining the swamp. So welcome back to Free Talkcast. I'm Aria, and today we're diving into one of the most spectacular examples of government gaslighting that we've seen in years, the Trump administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And this isn't just about one case or one administration. This is about a pattern that repeats every time the powerful are threatened with exposure. First, they promise transparency, then they claim the evidence doesn't exist, and then they attack anyone who questions the official story. We've seen this playbook before with JFK, with torture memos, with surveillance programs. The script is always the same. We'll release everything turns into, there is nothing to release, which then becomes, you're a conspiracy theorist for asking. But what makes the Epstein case different is that it's Trump's own base calling BS. 51% of voters disapprove of the administration's handling of the Epstein files. And some of Trump's most loyal supporters are furious and say they feel the administration has let them down, because it has. So let's start with what was promised versus what we got. During the campaign and early in his administration, Trump and his team made specific commitments about the Epstein files. Attorney General Bondi promised the public release of scores of records associated with federal probes into Epstein. She said, quote, it's a new administration and everything is going to come out to the public. In February, she told Fox News that Epstein's client list was sitting on her desk right now. Well, what actually happened? In late February, Bondi handed out binders with Epstein case files to pro-Trump social media influencers at the White House, files that ultimately contained little new information. Conservative internet personalities were provided with binders that were marked The Epstein Files Phase 1 and Declassified that contained documents that had largely already been in the public domain. Classic political theater. Make a big show of releasing information that was already public, and then claim you've been transparent when people complain that they didn't learn anything new. And then came the July memo that completely reversed everything that Bondi said. The Justice Department and FBI concluded they have no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein blackmailed powerful figures, kept a client list, or was murdered. The memo says that there was no incriminating client list. And wait, what? So when Bondi said the client list was sitting on her desk, what exactly was she looking at? Was she lying then? Or is the administration lying now? When asked about Bondi's previous remarks, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt tried to play down the discrepancy and said she was saying the entirety of all the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. But that's not what she said. She specifically mentioned a client list. But now we're supposed to believe that it never existed? When Attorney General Pam Bondi briefed President Trump in May on the Justice Department's review of the documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, she told him that his name appeared in the files. The conversation also included Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, and Bondi raised in the meeting that several names of high-profile figures were also mentioned. Sources familiar with the department's review said the files appeared to include several unsubstantiated claims that the Justice Department found not to be credible, including those related to Trump. Now, it's not a surprise that Trump was mentioned in the Epstein files, since his former friendship with the disgraced dude was well known. The men were pictured together on multiple occasions. Trump called Epstein a terrific guy in a 2002 interview, although they had a falling out 2 years later over some foreclosed oceanfront mansion in Florida. Inside the White House, officials were outraged that Bondi did not redact Trump's name from publicly available materials contained in Epstein binders distributed to influencers in February. Why would they be outraged if Trump's connection to Epstein was innocent and already public knowledge? Her failure to protect the president during the episode has been a long-standing point of contention between the Department of Justice and the White House. again, protect him from what exactly if there's nothing incriminating? The timeline here is crucial. Bondi told Trump in May that his name is in the files. By July, the administration claimed the files contain nothing worth investigating and no further information will be released. The revelations about the meeting contradict Trump's more recent denial that he was told he was in the files. Pressed last week on whether Bondi had told him he was named in the documents, he said, No, she's just given us a very quick briefing. So now Trump is lying about being told he was in the files, even though we know from multiple sources that he was told that in May. And what makes this situation remarkable is that it's Trump's own supporters who aren't buying it. Some of Trump's most loyal and vocal supporters were furious and said they felt as if the administration had let them down. Bannon was one of several of Trump's high-profile supporters who had chastised the administration's handling of the Epstein case. Right-wing media personalities who have promoted conspiracy theories about Epstein blasted Bondi on social media Monday, calling the Attorney General a liar and demanding answers from the Trump administration. Alex Jones posted a video showing his raw reaction to the memo, in which he teared up discussing the Epstein case. Now, Alex Jones is an actor, but still. Far-right influencer Jack, whose name I don't know, were all told more was coming, that answers were out there and would be provided. Incredible how utterly mismanaged this Epstein mess has been, and it didn't have to be. Even more telling, Republicans and Democrats on a House subcommittee voted last week to demand that the Justice Department hand over thousands of pages of files about Epstein and his associates. When Republicans are joining Democrats to subpoena a Republican administration, you know that something is seriously wrong. Representative Ryan McKenzie said that he would support efforts to release the DOJ files on the disgraced financier if the White House does not do more. And of course, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky introduced a resolution calling for the release of the Department of Justice records, the measure that prompted House Speaker Mike Johnson to dismiss the chamber a day early. Now think about that. The Speaker of the House of Representatives literally ended the session early, rather than allow a vote on releasing the Epstein files. This is not the behavior of people who have nothing to hide. When the Epstein story started causing problems, the Trump administration deployed every distraction in the playbook. But the usual deflection tactics, releasing unrelated information, blaming Democrats, blaming the media, hasn't worked with this controversy. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard declassified and released a congressional report on intelligence related to Russian interference, which was obviously meant to distract from the controversy surrounding the Trump administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. It was thrown out there intentionally to distract people and give them something else to talk about. Trump said that fellow Republicans, people who voted for him, were being duped by Democrats, said he doesn't even want their votes, and called those continuing to demand the release of the files weaklings. Trump has urged the media to shift their attention from the Epstein files to his theory involving a group including Obama, Clinton, James Comey, and James Clapper, whom he accuses of attempting to rig the 2016 and 2020 elections. But none of it's working. The Jeffrey Epstein mess surrounding President Trump is deepening amid growing defiance by some Republicans and despite the administration's most inflammatory attempt yet at distraction. The administration even sought to release grand jury transcripts from the Epstein case. A federal judge denied one of those requests. And this is because grand jury transcripts are almost never released. So all of this suggests that they were trying to create the appearance of transparency while knowing the request would be denied. Now let's talk about the circumstances surrounding Epstein's death, because this is where the official story becomes comically unbelievable. After 6 days, psychological staff removed Epstein from suicide watch following a psychiatric examination. He then returned to the special housing unit, SHU is what we call it in federal prison, where he was to have a cellmate and be checked on every 30 minutes. But on August the 9th, Epstein's cellmate was transferred and no replacement was brought in. So the most high-profile prisoner in the country, who had just attempted suicide 2 weeks earlier, was left alone in his cell. The 2 guards assigned to check his cell overnight, Noel and Michael Thomas, fell asleep at their desk for about 3 hours and later falsified records. Guards Tova Noel and Michael Thomas were accused in a grand jury indictment of neglecting their duties by failing to check on Epstein for nearly 8 hours, and of fabricating log entries to show that they had been making checks every 30 minutes as required. What were they doing instead of monitoring the most important prisoner in federal custody? Instead, the guards browsed the internet for furniture, motorcycle sales, and sports news, instead of monitoring Epstein in his cell 15 feet away in the shoe. But it gets better. 2 cameras in front of Epstein's cell also malfunctioned that very night. What are the odds that the cameras would malfunction on the exact same night that the guards fell asleep and the most high-profile prisoner in America decided to kill himself? Let's think about this. We're supposed to believe that on the same night, multiple independent failures occurred. Number 1, the most important prisoner in federal custody was left without a cellmate. Now, I've been to federal prison, and barring unusual circumstances, you always have a cellmate. Even when you go to the shoe, you have a cellmate in the shoe. Number 2, both guards fell asleep for hours. Number 3, the cameras malfunctioned. And number 4, Epstein just happened to choose those exact moments to commit suicide. So we have a quote here from a former mob boss who spent time in this very shoe. He says, "I spent several months on that tier and in those cells. And the first thing I have to say, there's just you. There's no way you are able to commit suicide. There's just no way. There's no way to hang yourself. There's nothing from the ceiling. There's nothing from the bed. You'd have to be a midget and work really hard to hang yourself, and I don't think you can accomplish it at that point." Even Epstein's own attorney found the official story hard to believe. According to Weingarten, when attorneys met with their client shortly before his death, quote, "We did not see a despairing, despondent, suicidal person." Now, about the video footage that the Trump administration released to prove Epstein committed suicide, remember, they promised to release the raw, unedited footage to settle the conspiracy theories once and for all. Do you think that's what happened? Of course not. Here's what actually happened. Digital forensics experts discovered that the clip released by the Department of Justice was actually made from at least 2 separate video segments that had been stitched together using Adobe Premiere Pro. The analysis showed that one of the original source clips used to create the final video was 2 minutes and 53 seconds longer than what the Department of Justice ultimately released. So almost 3 minutes of footage is missing from the, quote, raw, unedited video. But many viewers noted there seems to be a glitch in the video as the timer turns from 11:58 to 11:59, seemingly skipping a minute ahead to 12 o'clock midnight. When people pointed this out, Bondi said she had no knowledge of whether Epstein worked for intelligence services, and on the topic of the video, muddled through an explanation of how the recording system in the prison works.
To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide.
So, wait, what? The video was not conclusive, but it somehow proves he committed suicide, and there's a full minute missing from the footage, but that's totally normal because the system resets every night. But Julie K. Brown, the Miami Herald reporter, whose reporting exposed Epstein in 2017 and 2018, told CNN's Jake Trapper on Tuesday that there were actually other entrances to Epstein's wing besides the one shown on camera. So not only is the video edited and missing nearly 3 minutes of footage, it also doesn't even show all of the ways that someone could have accessed Jeffrey Epstein's cell. The missing and malfunctioning surveillance footage isn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern that stretches back to Epstein's first alleged suicide attempt. Surveillance video that was taken outside of the Manhattan jail cell of child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein during his first suicide attempt was permanently deleted, prosecutors said on Thursday. How did that happen? After first reporting that the video had been preserved, prosecutors told the court that further investigation shows that, quote, the MCC inadvertently preserved video from the wrong tier within the MCC. So they claimed they preserved video, but it was of the wrong floor. It was of the wrong cells. Officials said that it was due to a data entry error. When the prison's legal counsel looked up Epstein's cell number in the MCC computer system to ensure that the video would be saved, it showed that he was on a different cell and floor than where he was actually housed. And the backup system? Because surely this has a backup system. Well, according to MCC, there is a backup system in place to store all video from the SHU, where Epstein and Tartaglione were being held at the time. But a review by the FBI found that the video on the backup system was also erased since at least August of 2019 as a result of technical errors. So both the primary system and the backup system failed for the most important prisoner in federal custody twice. On the same night when the guards fell asleep and did not complete their suicide checks, and Epstein didn't have a cellmate and decided to kill himself. And what happened to the guards who were supposed to be watching Epstein? U.S. prosecutors decided to end their criminal case against them, even though they admitted to falsifying records on the night that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself on their watch. Quote, allegedly. Hold up. Allegedly killed himself, because I don't buy it. Only the 2 workers assigned to guard Epstein the night he died were even charged, and they avoided jail time in a plea deal after admitting to falsifying logs. Instead, they got community service and had the other charges dropped. So think about that. Guards who falsified federal records regarding the most important prisoner in America got community service. Meanwhile, people get years in prison for lying to federal agents about much less significant matters. One worker was on duty for 24 hours straight. The workers tasked with guarding Epstein the night he died were working overtime. One of them, not normally even assigned to guarding prisoners, was working a 5th straight day of overtime. The other was working mandatory overtime, which meant a second 8-hour shift in one day. So the Bureau of Prisons put the most important prisoner in the country under the watch of exhausted, overworked guards, one of whom wasn't even normally assigned to guard prisoners. And then when those guards predictably failed, the system gave them a slap on the wrist and moved on. I want to be clear, this isn't about Trump or Epstein. This is about how power protects itself in America. And the pattern is always the same. Promise transparency. Make a big show of how different you are, how you're going to drain the swamp and expose the corruption. Get people's hopes up. If they're not too jaded to, just reject that nonsense out of hand. Second, when time comes to actually release information, claim there's nothing worth releasing. Say you've done an exhaustive review and found nothing. Blame previous administrations for the lack of material. Third, when people don't buy that explanation, attack them as conspiracy theorists. Question their motives. Suggest that they're being manipulated by your political enemies. Fourth, create distractions. Release completely unrelated information, start new controversies, blame the media for focusing on the wrong things. We've seen this exact playbook over and over. We saw this exact playbook with the JFK files. Trump promised to release everything, then classified thousands of documents at the last minute, claiming national security concerns. We saw it with torture memos under Obama, promised transparency, then redact everything, and then claim executive privilege. The Epstein case is just the latest example, but it's particularly brazen because we have Bondi on tape talking about client lists and files sitting on her desk, followed by the administration claiming that none of it exists. One of our highest priorities is combating child exploitation and bringing justice to victims. Perpetuating unfounded theories about Epstein serves neither of those ends, according to a memo released by the Department of Justice. But how is releasing factual information about a convicted child trafficker's associates perpetuating unfounded theories? If the theories are unfounded, wouldn't releasing the actual evidence disprove them? Neither is this about satisfying curiosity or feeding conspiracy theories. This is about accountability. Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted child sex offender who allegedly trafficked minors to wealthy and powerful people for years. He died in federal custody under suspicious circumstances before he could stand trial or cooperate with prosecutors. If there really are no other perpetrators to investigate, if there really is no evidence of a broader network, then releasing that information would put conspiracy theorists to rest once and for all. The fact that they won't release it suggests the opposite, that there is information and it would be very damaging to powerful people. A plurality of voters think that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, while 20% think he committed suicide. I would speculate the remainder think he probably isn't really dead. Let's be realistic. The dude was a billionaire dealing with underpaid, overworked security guards. And if you had promised one of those people, hey, I'll give you $50 million each if you get me the hell out of here, they would do it. He's a billionaire. He could say, I'll give you each $100 million to get me out of here. They'll do it. I'll give you $100 million to help me fake my death. They'll do it. $100 million, we're talking about these people being set for life. And we know that people who work in the Bureau of Prisons can be corrupted with money. That's how drugs usually get in to the federal prison system. So is Jeffrey Epstein dead? I don't know. I tend to think not. He's too rich to have been killed in prison. He very easily could have bought his way out. I certainly don't think he committed suicide. If he's dead, he was murdered by someone else. Furthermore, a plurality of voters seems to agree with me and thinks that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, and only 20% believe that he committed suicide. 51% disapprove of the Trump administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files. These numbers suggest that most Americans don't trust the official narrative, and they shouldn't. We have an administration that promised to release information, claimed it was sitting on the Attorney General's desk, and then says it never existed. We have a president who was briefed that his name appeared in investigative files, then lied about being told that. We have House leadership literally ending sessions in order to avoid votes on transparency. And this is how institutional credibility dies, not through dramatic revelations, but through a steady accumulation of lies, contradictions, and cover-ups that make it impossible to believe anything that official sources say. The Epstein files controversy reveals something important about how power operates in America. It doesn't matter which party is in charge. When the interests of the powerful are threatened, transparency becomes the enemy. The Trump administration came into office promising to drain the swamp and expose the deep state. But when faced with information that might implicate powerful people, including Trump himself, they have chosen to protect the swamp instead. And the storm is now gathering its own momentum, and it's increasingly hard to see how Trump can calm it. That's because his own supporters see through the lies and contradictions. They know the difference between we'll release everything and there's nothing to release. The circumstances surrounding Epstein's death represent either the most spectacular series of coincidences in history or a coordinated effort to ensure that he never made it to trial. Camera malfunctions, sleeping guards, missing cellmates, deleted surveillance footage, edited raw video, and a justice system that treats falsifying federal records as a minor offense when it comes to the most important prisoner in America. The question isn't whether there are Epstein files that would be politically damaging. Clearly, there are, or the administration wouldn't be working so hard to suppress them. The question is whether you're going to accept being lied to by the people who claim to represent you. And I've got to be honest, I don't have a solution. Even if no one accepts the narrative being put forward that Epstein killed himself and that there was no list, even if everyone recognizes that to be BS, what can you do about it? I don't know, and I don't have an answer to that. The obvious solution would be to start stacking bodies. But I don't support that. I think it's a terrible idea, and I condemn the use of violence as a way of solving problems. Furthermore, using violence to solve this problem would not ultimately achieve anything. It would just usher in a new era of violent, corrupted politicians. And I think the system is set up to prevent you from voting these people out of office as well. So I don't know what to do. But the first step to solving this problem is to recognize that there is a problem. And the problem runs a lot deeper than the Trump administration wants to admit. That's it for today's Free Talkcast. I'm Aria reminding you that when they say files don't exist, they usually mean the files are too damaging to release.